what's my credentials for being here today? I'm on shluchos for 30 plus years. I guess that's my credentials. And we all deal with people with all types of situations. We see things that we are not always sure what we're seeing. Certainly in the early years, I didn't recognize signs that now I would recognize. The question is, what's our role? Are we able to help someone with their axles? Are we able to have someone at our Shabbos table? What is our role when we see things that are extremely difficult and complicated, et cetera, et cetera? So what I'd like to share with you in today's talk, I want to divide it into 4 parts. The first part is what is our role and what motivates us and what's our guiding light, et cetera, as shluchos, as Rebbetzins. The second part is how do we build a network of resources that we can turn to, that guide us, that lead us, because we're never going to know all the answers. And the third part is actual real case scenarios of things that happen in my Chabad house or in our preschool or situations that I dealt with in our mikvah and how I dealt with it. But I'd love that to become an open conversation, hear your real life situations, and just to give it as sort of like role playing of, and it helps also in that part for you to recognize something that regularly you wouldn't recognize. Or also, like, we also can't walk around, like, you know, when you take that child abuse mandated course that most of us had to take for one reason or another, you don't walk around looking for problems either. You're not going to diagnose everybody with something. So, and then the fourth is if it lends itself to a discussion, questions, answers, or comments, or input from everybody. Are we good? Yeah, okay. So, unfortunately, I didn't hear, what's your first name? Shana? I didn't hear Shana's presentation, so I'm sure a lot of, there's overlap, but from 2 different perspectives. We are shluchim of the Rebbe. Think about every single letter that Rebbe got. Now that we have access to so many of them, we realize just how vast, but all of us knew this because we ourselves would have written anything to the Rebbe, from personal to public to private to financial to mental. Doesn't matter what it was, our homes, our shidduchim. You know how our communities are always shocked that we ask the Rebbe, like, we should marry our husbands, or like, what does the Rebbe know about what you should marry? And it reminds me of this very famous story of this woman whose son, they were chassidim, but they weren't Lubavitchers, and he became a Lubavitcher, and he was a real Lubavitcher, and he was Reda Shidduch, and he liked her, she liked him, and they wrote into the Rebbe, and they got a bracha. The only problem was, his mother was very dead set against the Shidduch. So a Bacher wrote this to the Rebbe, that his mother is very, very opposed to the Shidduch. And the Rebbe wrote back to him, it's a good Shidduch. You should go ahead with it. So you can imagine the mother was even angrier, like, you're taking advice from the Rebbe doesn't know you. And she was complaining to everybody about this. And they said, why don't you write to the Rebbe, or you go to the Rebbe. That's what she did. She came to 770. And she stopped the Rebbe, and she wanted to talk to him. And she was fuming. How dare, like, you hijack my son and tell him who he should marry. And the Rebbe actually, for the way I heard the story, he took her in, he had yichudis with her, and he told her, you know, how do I give advice? He said, I don't know the boy, I don't know the girl. Sometimes I do, but for the most part, I don't always know the bacha and the girl. How do I give a bracha that they should get married? He says, I'll tell you what I do. I look up in heaven and I see if the neshamas are suitable. So that's what I did. When your son wrote to me, I looked up and I saw it was a good shidduch. So I gave him a bracha. But then he wrote to me that his mother was opposed. So I thought to myself, maybe I'm wrong. It's possible. So I looked again. And this time I saw that mamish is supposed to be together. So I told your son, it's a good shidduch. When she heard that, she went like, I'm getting the chills thinking about it, because she was a Chassidish woman, so she appreciated. She's like, who am I to mix in and say when a Rebbe says that he saw something up on high? So what happens when someone comes to us with their issues? Or we're not the Rebbe. We represent the Rebbe, which means our underlying thing is obviously Yisrael. We're not only about teaching someone mitzvahs. Everything is mitzvahs, but I'm saying our shlichus is emotional, psychological, physical. Chas v'shalom, someone in your community has a terrible death, a premature death, or someone suffers or whatever. You don't think to yourself, which mitzvah am I going to get them to do? You think, how can I be there for the person? You come to Shiva depending on your relationship with them. What can I bring them? Do they need help, physical help with the kids? Do they need financial help? You're not thinking, oh, what mitzvah am I get? That's not how we approach it. Our whole foundation of shluchus is that we care. And if I had to say there was one role that we have is that we actually care, which will lead me soon into what happens when you care, but you're not the one that's equipped. For example, the family I just told you that has a terrible tragedy, you're not going to be the grief counselor. You're going to realize this is a family that needs a grief counselor, needs someone for their children to speak to. They're going to need you like a mother is there for her children, like a sister is there for her sister or friends. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to be your support. Like the Baal Shem Tov says, a neshama comes down to this world for 70 or 80 years just to do a favor for another person. Which brings me to this also unbelievable story that this man, Nalabavich Chassid, had a very, very difficult time having children. And his friend told him, go to the Rebbe, wait outside his house, and you'll get a bracha. Because you couldn't get Yechidus, so it was very hard. So he said, but I'm Nalabavich Chassid, he said, it doesn't matter. Go get a bracha from the Rebbe. We have nothing to lose. And that's what he did. He stood by President Street. He waited. The Rebbe came out of the house. And he stopped the Rebbe, and he asked him for a bracha, and the Rebbe gave him a bracha. But the Rebbe spoke to him for a while. When the Rebbe left to continue walking to 770, the Bachrim that were there pounced on this guy. They were like, how dare you interrupt the Rebbe and take so much of his time? Who do you think you are? You just took 20 minutes of the Rebbe's time without any permission. You basically hijacked him. Anyway, he was mortified. He didn't look at it from that perspective. So he went quickly to 770, and after Ma'ariv, he went over to the Rebbe and he asked for mechila. And the Rebbe said to him, for what? He said, the Bachrim pointed out to me what. He said, first of all, the Bachrim had no right being there. It was man, whatever, their seder. And second of all, he tells him this, the Baal Shem Tov said that a neshama comes to this world for 70, 80 years just to do a favor for another. Maybe this is what my neshama came. The Rebbe said that, to do a favor. So, to begin with, that's what we are. So, the continuation of that story with the Baal Shem Tov, where he says a favor b'gashmius or b'ruchnius, not just b'ruchnius, is the line that another yid's Gashmias is your ruchnius. There's no difference to you. When you're doing a favor for another Jew, it doesn't matter if it's begashmias or beruchnius. So kavachayma, when someone comes to us with something serious, and very often they're not necessarily coming to us, but it comes out, and because we've created a relationship, and they feel that they can rely on us and trust us, we'll be someone that they'll turn to. Or you yourself will have, a feeling that this person is in need of a friend. It's very easy to look the other way because we have so much on our plates, and we don't really want, it's very draining sometimes. But there are times that you are the only one that they could turn to, and the only one that can help you, which we're going to see when we get to some of the case studies, but that you're the one that can guide them and put them in touch with the proper people that could actually help them. Again, much like a mother, your little kid doesn't know they have a problem. But a mother will pick it up and she'll take that child to the eye doctor, to the psychologist, to whatever the issue is, to the stomach doctor. You're the parent. What do you want the kid to grow up and then have to figure out their own problems, which sometimes happens? All right, so going back to our goal. So our roles. So our role, first and foremost, is caring, supportive, eyes open, and in case anybody needs a reminder, boundaries. Because I'm not suggesting that we just be without boundaries. That we have to be there for everybody, so no boundaries exist. And we all know. And again, in the last part, we'll discuss how easily these boundaries are crossed and how I deal with it, and I'm sure some of you have your own ways of dealing with it that you would share. Any questions so far or comments? It's extremely important, even though probably obvious, that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, and that we do have a vested interest in it being a Torah perspective. When I say that, of course, health comes before anything. You're somebody, if chas v'shalom, their life is threatened, but you're going to want to be a moral and spiritual support for this person. So if someone wrote into the Rebbe that they had a problem, the Rebbe wouldn't tell them this, this, and this. He would tell them, go to a doctor, get a second opinion. But he would also tell them, check your mezuzahs. Or even just the Rebbe's whole hashkafa that strengthen yourself, but do what you need to do. So us as shluchos of the Rebbe, we this is where we take our thing from, is show that you actually care about the person. You're not just checking off a list of things like, oh, did you do this, did you do this, did you do this? Also, use your common sense. Like very often when someone comes to speak to me, and originally I would just jump to something, first listen. And the answer will even come from what their words are saying. And I guess, I don't want to jump to my examples because I feel like I'll mess up the way I'm saying it, but maybe it'll become clear when I speak soon. So I'm going to stop now and go to part 2 for a little bit, resources. It's obvious that there are some amazing, amazing resources out there. And Shalom Task Force would be at my top of the list when it comes to domestic abuse. But I want to tell you that over 30 years, what happens, and on your own shluchas, you develop a very strong core of resources, and you need to. You don't even realize you have them. I'll give you an example. I have a very, very close friend that's a psychiatrist. And she's someone I trust because I know her. Her kid was the first kid in my preschool. I didn't meet her because she was a psychiatrist. I met her from my community. And then over the years, when I needed insight and I needed somebody that knew psychiatry, I would call her up and I would say, do you mind if I ask you a question? And she would take my call in a heartbeat. She doesn't take new patients. She doesn't, I don't have to tell you how hard it is to get to somebody that's a real expert. But within your community and within your own circle, you should start developing, and I'm sure many of you already have, your Rolodex. Anybody under a certain age doesn't know what a Rolodex means, but your contact list of your go-to people. I literally can call her in the middle of teaching a kala and realizing that I'm having a real trauma situation going on here. I can call up this friend of mine and tell her what's going on and get an appointment immediately. That's how you need to have those resources in your thing. You might say, but I don't, and you'll build them. And of course, there's unbelievable organizations within the Jewish world so that there's always someone that you can reach out to even if you don't. Shluchos ourselves have an unbelievable network, which I reach out to all the time. Is I'll post someone who's the best person for premarital counseling for a couple that's in this situation. And in 2 seconds, I'll have referral and find out later they're like the top in the field. It's just unbelievable the resources we have amongst our own shluchos. So within my own Rolodex, just to give you an example so that you'll start realizing, I have a friend that's a matrimonial attorney and a child advocate. She's an amazing resource when I feel like I don't know where to send someone that needs legal help, which I guess later on you'll hear. But if I'm going to be a friend to this person, I need to know I'm not all these things. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know law. I'm not a doctor. I don't know medicine. I'm not a psychologist or a social worker. My role is the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin is the shlucha. My role here is to be a friend, a guide, a firm hand, a mother figure or a sister figure, someone that can guide someone without taking on their problem. Because I'll be in that mud with that balabas, because I don't know how to pull someone out of the mud. I don't understand it. We learn certain things. I've learned a tremendous amount over the years with the mental health awareness that we're all being trained in, etc., that I never would have realized before, of what type of questions to ask when someone does come to me with a problem. And that's really, really helpful because it gives me an idea of who I should send them to. Otherwise, it's like hit or miss, and then you didn't really help them. Yes, good question. So one of them, which was very shocking to me, was to ask someone directly, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about ending your life? And when I heard them say that that's a question you should ask when someone's discussing, depression or whatever, I thought, that's crazy. I would never ask someone such a direct question. And that week, someone came and was confiding me about something, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do it, because that the conversation sounded that way. And the woman answered me yes. And I knew right away what type of help I needed to get her. It wasn't just like, when you have a chance, you should be taking some classes. You know what I mean? So that was one that was really important. The other one is in general, direct. If you're noticing discomfort, instead of just changing the topic, ask the person, I noticed you're uncomfortable. Did I say something that upset you? And then they'll tell you. And it's so I'm assuming many of you suffer from the same problem. Always think it's me. I said something, I wasn't this, I wasn't sensitive. It has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. The person has so much pain in their own life. It's usually about something going on in their life. And she says to me, yes, it's as you're teaching me, I was teaching her college classes as a second marriage. She described the trauma she went through during her first marriage and how it's still so prevalent. And that gave me an opportunity to ask her, are you seeing someone? Is there someone that's helping you work through your trauma? And she told me no, because I'm not happy with them. So I was able to literally, send her to someone because I have a Rolodex. Now, did she end up seeing the person I sent her? No, but that person gave her the intake and sent her to someone. And I knew I was trusting of that because I knew the person, who I was sending her to. So those were two examples that really stood out, let's say, that popped to my head. Some of us are more psychologically aware. Some of us are a little psychologically clueless, or red flags. If you're less experienced, you might not notice what a red flag means. Like that discomfort, you might have thought you're teaching college classes. It's a little weird. She's been married before, where you wouldn't even realize to ask the person, why are you feeling so uncomfortable? And the person really wants to, they're there to create a relationship with you. They want to have somebody that can help them, guide them to the right person. So we're on our resources. A huge resource is your husband. Don't forget him. Sometimes he can help, sometimes he can't. But he's a rabbi, so there's things that he'll know or have experience. I don't gossip with my husband about the people I talk to. And he doesn't gossip, I'm not using the word gossip, like he doesn't come home and say, what the woman I just met with said, and I don't come home and say, the woman, but very often I have a case that's just too big for me to carry. So I consult with him. This is the case. Very often I'll also ask the person, are you okay if I discuss this with my husband? They assume we discuss everything with our spouse. So then they meet up my husband and shul, and they're like, oh, your wife probably told you this and this and this. My husband doesn't know what they're talking about, or vice versa. Because we don't come home and fill in, somebody else just poured their heart out. You know what I mean? Like, if you go to the mikveh one night and you meet a woman and she says, oh, give your husband regards, you don't come home and give regards. Maybe a few weeks later you'll say, this woman wants to give, because there's boundaries. You don't want to, so that's our role, even though I don't know legally where the Rebbetzin falls in when it comes to client privilege, but I always assure people as I'm speaking to them, anything we speak about is confidential. And you want to create trust, you know what I mean? You don't want to, like, a woman this morning called me about something that happened with her son, and she said to me, and he really doesn't trust me because last time he shared something with me, he told me, don't tell Abba, and I did. I told Abba. She said, but shouldn't I be able to share everything with my husband? So I said, yes, but if you shared it with your husband, you could also tell your husband that your son is very uncomfortable sharing it. But you and your husband are like one unit when it comes to your children. So your husband doesn't necessarily have to go to your child and say, this was shared with me. This is something you and your husband as partners could figure out how to deal with what your child is going through. So there's a lot of the sixth sense of common sense, and I'm not saying this I'm just saying this from my own, like as if we're bringing, because there's not one answer to this about sharing with your husband. So, but he's a huge resource. And you know what? When you're newly married, everything your husband says is like, Torah Sinai, and hopefully 35 years later it's still that way, but you don't always have to agree with your husband either. You could say, I am gonna, I think this is what my instinct is telling me. And sometimes not. Sometimes you need like a third person. It just helps you talk it out. So a huge resource there is also the shluchos. And then I feel very strongly Shalom Task Force, which I even keep cards in the mikvah, because there are sometimes people that are not going to come and talk to you about what's going on, but you want to make sure that they know that there are resources that can help them. Someone handed me, I don't know if, I guess it was from Shalom Task Force, the little lipstick. Is it? Did you guys see that? She mentioned it? So the lipstick has inside the paper with the contact information, because they said that most men won't open your lipstick to look what's inside. So it's a safe place for someone that is threatened by a guy that's that controlling, that's how they did it. So we keep it in our mikveh in case we notice that there is somebody that might benefit from that resource. Okay, so that's with my resources. I'll tell you what's funny. Over the years, I have a judge that's a friend of mine, an assistant DA. It's not like I went in and collected them. This kid has sent his kids to our Hebrew school. The judge has her daughter in our friendship circle. And when I call her once for this, I'll only call her once in a year, because you never know who. Think in your own circles. When the Rebbe said a second opinion, right? We all follow that. Like, and then the Rebbe said, Maven, you did. Maven, you did. Right? Yes. An expert that's a friend. Right, so a Reifi you did. But it's also a Maven you did in other areas. Like when you build your Chabad houses and you don't ask a Maven, you're in trouble. And you don't ask a Yedid, you're in trouble. It has to be both. Someone that cares about you, but also someone that knows what they're talking about. Okay? Every Chabad house makes the same mistakes if they have a contractor that's going to do it for free, or they have an architect that's going to do it for free. So it's the same thing here with your Rolodex. It's not going to help you to contact a social worker for something that's legal, or you need to have a broad idea. And you might not have the answers. You might say that. Just like in your own family, if you came across a really serious situation, you'd have to go digging beyond your regular resources, because you don't know. But do realize that is our role. You can't just wash your hands and say, this is beyond my pay grade. Now, I say it all the time, it's beyond my pay grade, but it means I can't do it. I need to find somebody else that could do it. But you can't wash your hands of something that you're seeing pikuach nefesh in front of your eyes on any level. And it doesn't mean we can fix everybody's problems. We can't. It doesn't mean we have to go krich and confront people. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. I'm just saying that when the Torah says don't stand by when you see somebody that fell under their burden, what's it talking about? What's it talking? It's talking about our communities, our kids in our preschool, our families that we talk to. And now I'm going to discuss a few of those actual scenarios that happened. And I'm sure some of you have them, and you might not even realize you had them. Because as I was preparing for the talk, I was thinking which stories I'm going to share, and like one after another pops in. I don't have a million stories, Baruch Hashem, and they're not only domestic abuse, but I'm going to share the few that maybe could be helpful to you. So I teach a lot of kalas, and I'll teach a lot of women taras v'mishpacha. That's one of my biggest passions, and I really spend a lot of time doing that. And a lot of the women that I teach are already married and older. And you find out a lot of things you wish you didn't, you do not want to know. But again, poker face, friend, I'm not fixing, I'm not telling you what to do. A lot of people fall into the trap is you should leave your husband. You can't tell someone what to do with their life. You can be a support. You can be a sounding board. You can repeat back to them what you said so they can hear how bizarre it sounds. Oh, okay, good. I'm very happy to hear that. Okay. So do I do. Never mind. Anyway, so this is. So when I'm teaching kalas, okay, for the most part, Baruch Hashem, you're teaching kalas, they're very excited, or someone's getting married for the second time, or someone was in a very long-term relationship. And things will come up that we think we're the prudes. They have very, very serious dysfunction. Not everybody. Many people have a lot of serious dysfunction. The first time I heard something, I was like, must be just this woman. But after it happened so many times, I realized, wow, There's a lot of dysfunction in sexuality in the world, and I can't always fix people's problems. I never could fix someone's problem, but how can I help them, and how can I give them a different perspective? And I don't shy away either, because I'm not the therapist and I'm not the professional, and I will guide them to professionals, but I am their spiritual coach. So that means I do want them to have Hashem to hold on to. Because it's a very scary world when you have no spiritual center. So if I had to say what my real role is to be their, not that I'm higher than them, I could be their spiritual coach, but that's what we were educated in. It's Chassidus, Torah, Hashem, purpose, and Hashem comes to this world, it has a hard time. There was a woman that lived on our block in Crown Heights when I grew up, had a very, very hard life, very terrible life. Besides the war tragedies that whole generation had, her older son was murdered, like terrible stories. And she went on Yechizah to the Rebbe. She was not a Lubavitcher, but in those days everybody lived in Crown Heights. And the Rebbe told her, we're all soldiers in Hashem's army. Some of us work in the kitchen, and some of us work undercover. And I really, really loved that, because you're going to get the training you need for your mission. If you're a chef in the kitchen of the army, you're going to be taught how to cook for an army and everything you need in that. If you're undercover, you're going to get the tools you need. You're never a victim. You're always able to do something. So the spiritual core is very important, that you're never going to, God forbid, say anything that will invalidate someone's. That's what I told you before, is don't speak so fast. Listen and let a person feel heard by you. But give them something that they can hold on to, that you believe in them, that you praise them, that they have that pure neshama that can never really, nobody could ever take it away from them. Like Yosef HaTzadik told his brothers, you think you sent me to Mitzrayim? Hashem sent me to Mitzrayim. You think I'm going to be angry at you because you sent me to Mitzrayim? You have no power over me. And the reason why it's so liberating is because I'm not a victim of anybody. The person has to be held accountable. I don't have to put myself in toxic situations, but I am not a victim. Only the Eibishter could decide where I go, and therefore my neshama, it can always regenerate, even if it was put through the worst things. So again, you're not preaching to them, you're not going to be their therapist, but somehow you have to be able to be a rock that they can regenerate their own inner spiritual core. And so my biggest area where these things will come up is when I'm teaching Kala. So the story that I referenced before just happened a few months ago. I was teaching a Kala. I know her already for a while. It's her second marriage. And as I'm teaching her, and I don't remember which part, she literally tensed up and didn't look at me and flushed. And that's when I realized to ask her this question. I said, I see that you're very, very uncomfortable. Did I say something that upset you? But what you just asked before. And she answered me, yes, everything you're teaching me is, her first husband was also a Baal Tshuva. She says, the opposite of what he did in our relationship. And there was a lot of trauma. And she did go into details of the way their sexual union was very unhealthy. And she said, I'm just so traumatized by this. And that's when I asked her if she got help, because she's entering a new marriage. It's all coming with her. So I could teach her so much bracha from today till tomorrow. If she can't have a healthy union with someone, what does it help that I'm going to tell her about how many bedikas she's supposed to be doing, you know? So that's when she said to me, I'm between doctors because I really didn't connect with my last doctor. And I don't have a doctor. And then, of course, she also shared some of her other health challenges. So I realized it's not just that I have to put her in touch with like a therapist that dealt with trauma. She also needs someone that's sensitive to medication and something like that. So that's how I realized which person I should put her in touch with. And she also really wants someone she could talk to, which not all psychiatrists are the talking. That's not what they're more medical. So this particular friend of mine is very big on that. And till today, she's her patient, and it's an unbelievable relationship. Like, she's not actually my friend's patient, she's my friend's colleague's patient, but I'm saying that was a successful shidduch. Now, at another point, this woman came to speak to me, and even though I've asked this question to other people, but exactly the question I just remembered that Malki asked me happened again with this same woman. She came one night, just kind of, I must speak to you. And actually, this is when I realized to set her up with this woman, is she was suicidal. So I said to her, are you thinking of hurting yourself now? She says, no. I said, who's home with you? She says, my husband. I said, is he home the whole time? Yes. Do we have to take you to the hospital? Like, I need to know that I'm not sending someone home and they're going to kill themselves between here and the home. You might have spoken more about this. That's definitely above my pay grade. But you have to make that judgment call, literally, okay? Because I once had a girl working for me, and that was what I was worried about. She came to work in our camp, and her behaviors were very, very erratic. And it was her parents had to make that call. It was way beyond my ability to make sure that a counselor in my Gyney Yisrael was safe. So I'm veering from the topic. But going back to the domestic abuse, this woman's previous history of domestic abuse with her husband definitely would have carried into her next relationship, and I would not have known about it. I only knew about the woman's like mental health challenges in other areas, but because of the signs that were coming up while I was teaching for Taras HaMishpacha. And I think a lot of us wouldn't even know, when I first started teaching Taras HaMishpacha, I wouldn't have known to recognize that discomfort level. I'd love to hear if anybody has anything they want to add to that, or if you
when I was much younger, I would feel like I was crossing my boundary to ask or to put it out there. What if I was wrong, whatever. And I think now you have to trust your gut, like get to a place where you really trust your gut.
Exactly. And there are ways to say something in a very like